Listen up, lads. Welcome back to the Daily Krumper, and today I'd like to teach you lot about some list building fundamentals as to when use playing your orcs on a table, as well as a few deployment tips and tricks on how to get the best out of your boys when playing 40k. This video idea comes from a recommendation from one of the fellow gits of the channel, so thank you very much for that. Because I've heard some feedback and how some of yous would like to see more ideas as to how to play orcs at a high or at least competent level. So what I've got right here is a Bully Boys list that I made up. This list is 2,000 points on the nose, and it's set up as you can see here. So for starters, when I make an orc list, no matter what detachment I'm running, I like to think of a few key factors. The first being, I need to play the primary game, that is, hold objectives in the middle of the table. I need to be able to complete my secondary objectives to get me points, in addition to my primary scoring, and I need to have plenty of damage dealing units that can help eliminate and crump resources and opposing units from enemy gits and their armies. So when choosing what units to put in my list, I have to think of those things in mind. So typically, what I first start out with, no matter what detachment I'm running, I run this little package right here of gits. What this is a squad of grots, a 5-pack of storm boys, and then a 10-pack of commandos, which with their new rule, they can split up into 2 5-man units of commandos. What this does is this covers your bare essentials for your secondary game with the orcs. You have your grots to sit on your backfield objective, hopefully farm command points using their ability. It is 11 super cheap OC2 bodies for only 40 points that can then not only hold your home field, but also stretch out as much as they can to try to prevent as much space from your opponent to disallow them gits from deep striking into your backlines. The 5-pack of Storm Boys is able to go into deep strike and be a cheap deep striking unit that will later in the game deep strike in your opponent's lines and get you secondary objectives. If you pull a behind enemy lines that requires you to have units in your opposing gits deployment zone, if you pull engage and you have one table quarter that none of your lads on the board can get to, if you pull establish locus, and to get the maximum points of that one, you have to do an action in your opponent's deployment zone. There's a lot of different cards that you can pull from the secondary deck that a cheap deep striking squad of Storm Boys will help you score. And then finally the commandos, with the ability to split into 2 individual 5-man units that both can still infiltrate, will allow you to have gits in the middle of the board right out the gate, turn 1, in case, again, you pull a secondary objective that requires you to be in the middle of the table, whether it be area denial, or again, establish locus, because you can do it in the center, even secure no man's land or extend battle lines. It just means that you're not missing out on potential points that yous can score. It makes you very efficient at scoring when those specific cards come up. Because remember, you can crump as many gits as you like, but if you ain't getting points, you ain't going to be winning games. So this is definitely the bare minimum that I like to run for doing those specific roles. As for primary game units, now Orcs, they are a melee-centric army. They want to get up in your face, hit you hard, crump them good, punch them as quick as he can, and keep running. That is the true Orky way. So when you talk about other armies discussing how they have certain game plans of how they score primary, they usually might do it a bit different. For instance, today's we're just going to be facing off against the Fishy Boys of the Tau. So if I look at the Tau list, a Tau player might be saying, okay, what units can I use to get me primary points? What units can I specifically bring to sit on objectives in the midboard? Because Tau are a shooting-centric army. They don't do melee hardly at all. There's some chicken gits that could do a little bit, but even then it's not great. Typically, Tau ain't running melee. So for these gits, they's gonna have to run either infiltrating units or fast-moving, cheap, skirmishy type units, something like these stealth suits, or these devilfish that are full of breaches, or these piranhas, fast, cheap-moving units that can get into the midboard and sit on them objectives and be a big target that your opponent needs to deal with. Because if they don't, then of course the Tau player will then score primary points on their turn. But whereas with the Tau, they run a risk by doing that, because the further up into the midboards you get, the higher of a likelihood it is that you will be charged and get locked in combat, which of course Tau don't want to be in. So that's why the primary game can sometimes be a bit trickier for armies like this. But with the lads, we's gonna be getting up into the middle of the board, charging you and crumping you anyways. So really, any of our units can count as primary scoring units. A squad of knobs can hop out of a truck, charge onto an objective into a unit that was already on it, kill said unit in melee, and then be on the objective afterwards with enough OC to take it. That's typically how melee armies do it, of course. Charge on an objective, take it from your opponent. Knock out an enemy piece in the process. That's just how the rule of the game goes. The third pillar being damage dealers, that's the good stuff. That's the big meat of the list. What units can you bring that is points efficient and effective at efficiently killing whatever it is that you point them at? Those units are typically the fun parts that you get to look through your codex and try to bring. So in this list, I've got a little bit of everything. I've tried to go with multiple small units in this Bully Boys list specifically, because Bully Boys, of course, the detachment rule allows you to war twice. And that gives you a lot of flexibility. Because in this case, when we fight against fishies, they've got a lot of scout movers and a lot of infiltrating units, but they still have a good amount of units that want to sit in the backfield and just shoot you from long range for the whole course of the game. So with Bully Boys, you might need to call a first war early in the game just to try to deal with those early game infiltrating, scouting, screening Tau units, but then still be able to later in the game call that war again to be able to get at those backline units that you want to crump as well. And that helps when you have multiple small units like this. As you see, I've got 2 5-pack of knobs with war bosses. Usually I like to run one 10-pack of knobs with a war boss, because I find that it's just a giant high damage unit when you call that war. But again, in a case like I just explained with the infiltrators on the Tau side, if you send a 10-pack of knobs with a war boss into a ghost kill or a couple piranhas or stealth suits or whatever it is that's in the midboard for the Tau kids, you're gonna kill them no problem. You'll probably overkill them by a lot. But then, your knobs are gonna be out in the open to be free game to be shot by whatever else the Tau player then has on the board. So having the small units like this, it keeps the unit semi-cheap, so that way, you know, if a 5-man Nob squad with a war boss charges in on a wall, kills a ghost kill, and then is holding an objective, now if they are somehow killed in the next turn, it's not as big of a detriment to you as the Orc player, because you're not losing a whole lot of points worth of gits. You still have a lot more bigger pieces of damage dealing units in your army to help make up for the resources you just lost. So yes, to go over the list, I've got a big battle wagon here with Ghazi, because now that he only takes up 4 slots, it means you can realistically put him in a wagon with other units, and have a nice big compact transport that can hide a bunch of gits. In this case, I'm running him with a 10-pack of boys. So between 10-pack of boys, Ghazi for 4 spots, Makari for 1, that's 15 total. Battle wagon takes up 22 slots, that leaves us with 7 slots left over, so I brought a cheap 5-man of Burner Boys along to throw in there as well. And the Burner Boys, they're mainly going to be there as, again, just for a cheap chaff unit that can hop out the battle wagon, run out, stand on an objective, screen out an opponent, do a secondary, do an action, be annoying. They're not really there for damage dealing. They're just there to be cheap and annoying and give me points. And the reason we're running Ghazi with 10 boys rather than with the Knobs or the Breaker Boys or even the Mega Knobs, because he can lead all of them gets now, is that with this package, Ghazi is mainly going to be the only damage dealer in it. Really, it's just Ghazi and 10 idiots just to soak up damage for him. You know, before the change happened, you typically see Ghazi being ran with 2 to 3 Mega Knobs. And again, they're Mega Knobs, whereas they can do damage, it's not going to be to the caliber that Gaz can. And Gaz is the one that everybody wants to kill. So those 2 Mega Knobs were really just there to be big scary meat shields to protect the big boss. But in my opinion, 10 boys can do that more effectively, because it's 10 bodies versus the 2 Mega Knobs you'd run with before is only 2 bodies. Yes, the Mega Knobs have a 2-up save, and they've got 3 wounds apiece, and they get the feel no pain during the war, which is good, don't get me wrong. Plus having Gaz with the 10 boys gives them that +1 to hit and wound, which will up the damage potential of said unit by quite a lot. So you can run them with Mega Knobs if you want. You can run them with a big 20-pack of boys and do it that way. You wouldn't be able to fit it in the battle wagon, but you could run it up the board, probably use a weird boy to jump them. It's not bad, but I like running this configuration just because it's small, compact, and ain't breaking the bank in terms of points. Next up, we've got 2 identical truck packages here, both of which have a 5-pack of Knobs and a War Boss, as said previously, as well as a pack of Tank Busters. Now, you'd probably recognize this as kind of a SWAT team package, as famously coined by other YouTubers on here of the Orc variety. Well, instead of Tank Busters, typically you see Flash Kits, which Flash Kits are still good. Just I choose to use Tank Busters in this configuration because I see Tank Busters as critical for any Orc game plan, especially if you're trying to run melee-centered Orcs. And I spoke about that in my The Big Hunt Detachment review, but in 10th edition 40k, vehicles are the name of the game. Back in 9th edition, toughness characteristics capped out at tough 8. There were some tough 9 models in the game, but those were reserved for like the super big, super tough enemies, your Dominus class knights, your great unclean ones, Mortarion with like a psychic power on them and something. But typically, big, heavy, tough vehicles like Land Raiders were only toughness 8. And with the orcs, you had power claws would give you strength times 2, rather than just a flat strength amount. So a knob that was strength 5 base with a power claw times 2 to his total strength of 10. And a strength 10 power claw on a knob would wound any vehicle in the game on 3s. So it made knobs very effective at dealing with vehicles. Now we're in 10th edition and toughness values went up through the roof. Now your typical baseline vehicles, that being like a Rhino or a Chimera or something like that, is only toughness 9 now. And your tougher vehicles, like your aforementioned Land Raiders, are all the way up to tough 12. With some, again, bigger targets, like them big Knights, or the Stomper, or even the Bane Blades from the Guard, are toughness 13. But then the Power Claws lost their strength times 2. Now a Power Claw is just strength 9. That's it. You get the +1 strength from the war, bringing it up to strength 10, which helps. But again, if you're going into tougher vehicles, like Lehman Russes, like Rogel Dawns, Land Raiders, whatever have you, your knobs are going to be wounding them lads on 5s. So, as a result, you're going to need something like Tank Busters to help deal with them super dead-eyed targets. Another point in the Tank Busters' favor is, as you can see, most units we're running, we are putting in transports. That's what a lot of armies tend to do nowadays, because transports are just so zogging good in 10th edition. So if you're playing into a beaky Marine player, and he's got all his big beefy shooting and melee gets in Rhinos or Impulsors of their own, yous want to be able to destroy them transports to make them spill them gets out onto the table for your melee boys to then come in and crump them in a 1-2 punch sort of situation. Because otherwise, your knobs, your mega knobs are going to charge into a Rhino. They will probably crump the Rhino, but then the melee beaky gets hop out afterwards relatively unscathed, and then they's going to charge you on the beaky boy's turn and kill your knobs. And now all of a sudden, that's one big piece of your army that you ain't got no more. And the only thing the beaky Marine player lost was just one of them transports, which are typically pretty cheap. So that's why the Tank Busters are here. In addition to them, I've got a third truck here that is going to be rocking a Mega Armored Big War Boss and 3 Mega Knobs. Again, running them small, cheap, but still just enough volume of attacks to be efficient in combat. And these Mega Knobs, if you's wondering, I specifically like to run my Mega Knobs in this configuration, that being Power Claw and Kill Saw. So that way you have the option to punch an unsuspecting git with one or the other. You're going into a Land Raider that might pop an Armor Contempt or something and you need the extra AP, use a Kill Saw. If you's not charging into a vehicle and you just really need to charge into some elite infantry like a Grey Knight Terminator or a Custodes, then you use your Power Claw, because it gives you the more volume. And then I run the boss with them, just give them that +1 to hit, because again, Power Claws hit on 4s, that's not great. Making them hit on 3s is a substantial improvement, and in addition, the war bosses themselves just hit pretty good in addition. And then I also got a second identical squad, Mega Armored Big Boss and 3 Mega Knobs. They are going to be riding around in Deep Strike, because in this configuration I gave this Mega Boss that teleporter enhancement to allow his unit to Deep Strike. And the other Mega Armored War Boss we gave an enhancement, I believe it's called the Biggest Boss in Bully Boys, just gives him +2 wounds. And really that's just because we had 10 to 15 points left over at the end of the list making. So yeah, that's the gist of the list. And just to touch on the transports idea again. In Orcs, again, since we're a melee focused army, yous need transports. You see all these big, expensive, hard-hitting units, Gazi, the Knobs, Mega Knobs, Tank Busters, all of them, each of them has a seat in each of these transports. And it's very important because we's orcs, and even though we're tough 5 across the board, with the Mega Knobs being tough 6, we don't have that great of defensive stats. Knobs got 4 up saves, 2 wounds, which is nice, but they don't ever feel no pain or anything. Tank Busters, same thing. You know, they're relatively squishy, all things considered. So buying them a transport means you are bubble wrapping this whole package with a toughness 8, 10 wound vehicle. And not only that, the truck is going to move 12 inches a turn, whereas all these lads only move 6 inches. In the Mega Knob's case, they move 5. Gazi's case only moves 5. So it makes them much faster. And it also reduces the overall footprint of the boys you're putting inside of them. So as you can see, this is how much real estate these models take up, versus this is how much one truck takes up. You can hide one truck behind a ruin or even inside a ruin much easier than you can hide 11 models. No, 12 models. So that's why it is critical to run transports in orcs. That's why it's critical to run transports in any army that has access to them. Because a boy on the ground is a dead boy. At least assuming that it can be seen and or is in range to be charged. So let's go move into deployment, and I'll show you some other tips and tricks on how to put this on the table. Alright lads, so the mission I got set up is Mission P from the chapter approved mission deck. This is Scorched Earth and Crucible of Battle on Terrain Layout 4. So I've got all my orcs set up here. As you can see, I've got me transports all laid out. I've got me teleporter Mega Knobs in Deep Strike, as well as my 5-pack of Storm Boys. Nothing is in normal strategic reserves. So really, all we've got to deploy for our army is going to be this here. The 2 squads of commandos, the Gretchen, and the 4 transports. Versus the Tau fishy side over here, they've got their 2 devilfish full of breaches, but everything else is going to start on the board. So now, say the fishies win a roll-off and they decide that they want to deploy the first unit. Now in this case, which makes sense because the fishies have loads and loads of infiltrating units in this army. They've got the Ghost Keel, all 3 scout teams, Dark Strider over here by himself, plus they've got a lot of scout moving targets. They have a squad of Kroot Carnivores they can scout, the 2 Piranhas can scout, and also they're running an Ethereal with an enhancement, because this is the Mont Card attachment, which will allow 2 units near him to also scout. So the Tau definitely want to get the drop on us in order to secure the midboard as quick as possible. So what they's most likely would do in this situation is they take a squad of stealth suits and drop them right over here on Day's natural expansion objective. So there's probably something about in here outside of the wall, so that way they don't get charged immediately, but of course staying outside of 9 inches of our deployment zone. So they'd probably put something right there. Now, that's important to note, because now we's going to deploy, and we also have infiltrators in the form of our 2 5-man commando squads. Now, we knows that them Taus are going to want to infiltrate as much as possible, so we want to prevent that. So we have a couple options. Do we counter deploy and just put our 5 commandos over here, shutting off a 9-inch bubble from this point, or do we be ballsy with it and just put 5 commandos stretched out like this in the midboard, which would prevent a lot of this section of the board from being infiltrated and also scouted into. So says we did that. We just took the 5-man commandos with choppers stick him here in the mid-board. We can stretch him out a bit, but we have to stay outside of 9 inches of these stealth suits that dropped in. So let's see, that is the farthest we can go from them lads. So we put them, and, you know, coherency is about 2 inches, so we could easily stretch these lads. So this is an option you can do as your first deployment. So what this does is these 5 commandos have to stay outside of 9 inches of the opponent's deployment zone, which we have done, as well as staying outside of 9 inches of these stealth suits that they's already put down. So if we put these lads here, what this does now is if the Tau player goes to infiltrate another unit, let's say they try to put down another squad of stealth suits, well, we knows they can't go anywhere in this area, because if they drop right there, well, that's within 9 inches of our gits, and that is not a legal place to be put. So this could end up somewhere way over here, more than 9 inches, so they could go something like that, but then there's not getting as much benefit from the infiltrate in the first place, because look, they're only a couple inches outside the deployment zone. Now in this case, they could definitely go over here on our deployment, our expansion objective, which in this case probably isn't too well. So maybe instead of trying to completely deny the mid-board a bit, maybe you would instead put them 5 commandos somewhere like this a ways. So that way it still screens off your objective from being infiltrated into, and screens off this from the mid-board from being infiltrated into. So that's a little neat tip and trick that you can do with infiltrators, and why they're so important in today's 40k, because again, you have armies like this where it's just bunch of infiltrates, bunch of scouts, and you don't want all these Tau units starting all in the middle of the table before the game even starts. Now this could be considered a ballsy move, because if yous don't go first, then these 5 commandos are just going to get blown off the table immediately. They can be seen by just about anything in the opponent's deployment zone as they want. But again, 5 commandos is only half of a commando squad, which runs you about 60 points. So it'll be up to you to gauge whether that is a worthwhile investment to put yourself in a better game position or not. If you don't want to feel ballsy like that, well, then you can instead just put these lads effectively mirrored what the other stealth suits were. Just stick them on your natural expansion objective. That way they're all in the building, they're being hidden from anything that might come and try to shoot them. And they are still projecting a 9-inch bubble of don't drop here like this. And that's not bad at all. So if they were to do that, these Tau boys might drop right here, but then they are susceptible to being shot and or charged by us turn 1. So realistically, they might put them boys probably somewhere in this building. Like so, not super important. Then we go back to us lads. My other 5-pack of commandos, I'm gonna put probably right about in this terrain piece, all the way up against the wall like so. Now this isn't anything super crazy, it's barely outside of our deployment zone, but what it's gonna allow these to do is if we get turn 1, or even if we don't go first, I mean these commandos are pretty safe from being shot by any of the things that the fishies are gonna put down, but turn 1, if we pull an objective like area denial, or establish locusts, or extend battle line, secure no man's land, anything like that, any secondary that requires you to be in the middle of the board, then these commandos can move their 6 inches, don't have to advance or anything, and go and touch this objective, holding it to do, again, whatever secondary you might have pulled. Before I would do this with a 5-pack of Storm Boys, I would just have them move 12 inches up into the mid-board turn 1 if I pull a card that says we need to do that. But with, again, the commando change, you get the 2 units for the price of 1 now. So they've kind of taken that spot. So that's why I put them lads At this point, my infiltrators are all down. Let's see, the fishies, they probably just I don't know, throw something back there on their home objective. We go over to our Gretchen here, and we want to put them back on our home field objective. But again, with the coherency rules being that if you are a unit that is more than 6 models, you have to be within 2 inches of 2 or more models from your squad. So I want to be able to stretch these grots out to be able to take up as much real estate as possible in my deployment zone, because I don't want any sneaky geeks getting behind me and shooting my grots up, or just being in my back line doing secondary objectives and getting my opponent points. In this case, even though the fishy gits don't have any deep strikers, they do have these Vespid boys, and these boys have the uppy downy rule. So at the end of the opponent's turn, which in their case would be me, the orcs, the Vespid can go back up into strategic reserves and drop down on the following turn, and them gits do have deep strike. So until I get rid of them fly boys, I have to be weary of where them gits might be able to land. So these grots, I might string them out something like this, trying to have them take up a lot of space while still not being exactly like right out in the open, because again, there's grots and grots can die real zogging quick. But in this configuration, that means nothing can drop behind me. The sides of my deployment zone is being pushed out all the way to here, and this side is being pushed all the way out to there. So there's a lot of real estate that cannot be deep struck in because of the way I've maneuvered these grots here. And that's pretty much how I'd run them every time, because again, most armies are going to like to run deep strikers, strategic reserve units, whatever they have you, because they want to get behind you and get them good juicy angles into your lads. Let's see, next up, they probably put some of the Vespid in the back to be able to come up at the end of my turn. And then back to us. So now we have these big transports, and again, look, they take up such less room than all of these lads we've got inside of them. So the important part with the transports is you want to deploy them in a way that they obviously cannot be seen, at least easily, from the opponent. So in this case, I'm going to take my first truck, and I'm going to put it right about here's a ways. You have to be a little bit careful, because if we look at the line of sight barriers, we know that this is a line of sight right here. So if something's in the fishy deployment, right there, okay, that's that line of sight. And you can see it's not clipping our truck, which means our truck is safe right about here. On this part, however, that is definitely line of sight to see the truck. But as you can see where I am up here at the start of the line, that is outside of the fishy deployment zone. So if something on the Tau army wants to come out and shoot my truck turn 1, they're going to have to at the very least get up somewhere about this way, which is what we want. We want the fishies to come out and play, because we want to come and crump them big juicy targets with the big guns that might want to take out our truck lads. So even though this truck isn't fully hidden, it's at least hiding in a position that if it is to be exposed, the Tau is going to have to expose themselves in order to shoot us. And of course, that could be advantageous to us. So this is where I'd put this truck. We'll say that this is the first truck with the knobs and the tank busters in it. So I'll put this lad right there to signify it. Next up, we'd probably have a squad of Vespid would go over here to be able to uppy downy. Again, doesn't matter too much, we're not focusing on the Tau. Next up, we'd have another truck. Let's see, this is the second truck with the knobs and the tank busters. These gits are probably going to want to go right behind this piece of terrain, not inside the terrain, because remember, if you are inside a terrain or even towing it like this opens up the entire terrain piece for your truck to be seen. Because even though vehicles have to be wholly within a terrain feature to see out, if used as even partially on a terrain piece, then you can be seen even though you cannot see out. So we want to keep this truck all the way off the terrain piece so that way nothing over here, all the way down here, can see into us. So we're probably going to put it right there, because again, with lines of sight, like, that is the line from the 2 deployment zones. That is, of course, not hitting our truck. The only way that something could see it is if they hop out of this building up to right about there. And even then, they probably won't be able to see it, especially if we shimmy it back just a little bit. So this truck completely safe from harm in this instance, with the war boss and the tank bosses in it. And the good part about these two being central to the deployment zone is, say some big vehicle, or I don't know, say when the Devilfish decides to move up turn 1 with all of its breaches, goes to right about there. Well, now you've got your truck full of knobs that can hop out there 3. Right. Warboss can hop out 3 to right about there along with his knobs. They would move 6 to about there, and then be able to get a 7-inch charge into this Devilfish. Because that's another important thing with trucks and transport in general, is it effectively is being used as a springboard for your melee units to get up the board. Because how it works is you would disembark 3 inches to get out of a vehicle, then you can move, advance, charge, do whatever it is a normal infantry unit would do normally. So we got out our 3, we moved our 6 for effectively 9 inches of movement. And since we's bully boys, we can call a war, so this war boss and his unit could even advance an average of 3 or 4 inches, and then get a charge in. And look, now that's a 3-inch charge. That's pretty much unfailable. So that's an option you can do there. Or say you want to get at the breaches that are inside of it, then that's when you would hop the tank busters out over on the side here, something like this. Position them in such a way as to where they are still trying to hide behind the terrain as much as they can, just because we don't want to give the opponent free lines of sight. But in this case, all of them can still see this Devilfish, shoot it on up, say they destroy it, and then the breaches get out, say they probably get out back behind here, but then, even then, the Warboss and the Knobs would still probably have a pretty decent charge into all them Pathfinders. So that's what I'm talking about with the 1-2 punch, lads. Destroy the transports with your tank busters, and then get at the meat inside with your melee units. And with this truck being here, allows us to do something like that. Another tip is, say you do not go first. Say the tower does not go first, and you go first, and there's nothing here to charge into first. Actually, here, let me deploy everything, and I'll kind of show you what it is I'm trying to do. Alright, so this is how everything's deployed. Again, as you can see, I've got each of my transports hidden behind terrain pieces, so as they cannot be seen by any of the opponents at least turn 1, without barring some crazy advance and shoot maneuver. But again, say we get turn 1, but we notice there's not a lot in the midboard that seems like juicy targets for us to be able to shoot and or charge in our turn. So what we can instead do is a maneuver called staging, which is what a lot of melee units, melee centered armies rather, try to do. So what we do with this truck full of knobs and a warboss, and we would shove it all the way up against the wall in this terrain piece. So that way, it's still mostly hidden. This does open up a line of sight right about here for something to be able to shoot it. So that is something you gotta worry about. But, I mean, even then, say the transport gets shot and blows up, well, at least your gits are still somewhere in the midboard, relatively unscathed, because it wasn't them getting shot, it was your transport getting shot. But say the truck got through unscathed. So this then means on your turn 2, you can use this forward position as a bit of a springboard for your lads. So similar to our notion with the devilfish that we made, we would take our 5-man knob squad with our war boss. We would get all of the gits out 3 inches. Now this truck is right alongside the wall here, so we could have them go all the way up as far as this point. Then the unit can act as normal. Say we call the wall, we roll in advance, again an average of, we'll say 4. Now these lads can move 10 inches up the board to right there and be able to charge whatever it is your opponent may have still in their deployment zone, or if they did move up, say they just moved up a little bit up against the wall. And now your gits have a pretty decent charge to go into them. You see, it just gives you this big, massive threat range from this staged position for you to be able to hop out and go after anything. If I was the opponent and I saw that you had put a truck right up against the wall with a bunch of melee gits in it, I'd be like, well, Zol, where can I move to where them knobs ain't gonna immediately hop out and charge me for wherever it is I go? If I move a Riptide up here, well, that's only, less than 16 inches away. We just moved, 10, so it's less than 6 inches away from there, so that's a 5-inch charge again. So, you see what I mean? It presents a very hard decision for your opponent as to what to deal with. Yes, they can try to get up into the midboard to try and shoot your truck and make it to where your boys have to get out somewhere behind, so that way they won't be shot at. But again, that means you're moving something up to right about there, and then now, boom, well, this Riptide is now in the midboard, and these boys over here that probably would have, staged up with their truck. Okay, get out of here, lad. Probably would have staged up with their truck somewhere in here, and then now these gits would have got out right about here and moved up and would have got a good charge over this Riptide. So staging your transports with their small footprints full of your melee boys is very critical in being able to succeed with the lads. Move this truck up here, again, gets get out 3 to right about there, then they move 6 inches up to there, potentially advance another 3 inches, we'll say. Now look at just how much distance you get. 9 inches normal move plus 3 to 4 inches of an advanced move, that's like 13 inches you're moving. And if you have a knob, war boss, whatever it be, right here now, this thing can charge any of these units, maybe not that because it's more than 12, but any of these units from where they are. And then you can get into other, even more shenanigans. Where say these knobs all charge into this Riptide. You can base the Riptide. If you roll high enough, you might be able to completely wrap this thing all the way around his, and say these knobs are somehow able to destroy the Riptide. Well, you get the 3-inch pilot afterwards. Oh, well, there is a broadside less than 4 inches away from us, so moving 3 inches towards the nearest enemy target due to how consolidating works. Well, now, use within an inch, you have now locked up this broadside, and unless it has that specific weapon system to allow it to fall back and shoot, it is now going to be effectively combat useless because it's stuck in combat with your boys. This knob is closer to this piranha, and it is conveniently exactly 4 inches away, so if we move 3 inches here, that will put us exactly an inch away from the piranha, also locking that in combat. Move the rest of the boys just to maintain coherency and whatnot. And then look at that. You've not only tied up 2 units, you've also blocked off this area from other units trying to move through. If this devilfish tries to move, it doesn't have enough movement to completely fly over these flash kits, or these knobs, without being within an inch. And that is not a legal move. So now this devilfish is stuck where it is, unless it wants to go backwards or over side to side, in which case it's still not getting where it wants to be, which is having all them breaches pop up in the midboard and shoot your gits off of objectives. So staging and using this sort of slingshot method, from what people call it, is also critical for success with your boys on a table. Now, that's probably all I got for this. I know it was a bit messy, I was kind of a little bit all over the place, but hopefully you kind of got the gist of what I was trying to get at here. Melee armies, especially the orcs, they can seem pretty easy and brain dead, you know, oh, just run everything at them. But sometimes you gotta be tactical. You gotta be cunning, not always brutal, lads. Remember that. So using these sorts of tips and tricks will immediately help you win games on the table. Because if you're not running transports and say you just stuck everything on the line. Alright, here we go. So say yous was a newer player and you just, you know, got into the true Orky mindset, just deploy everything on the line and just run it forward at the opponent as quick as humanly possible. And said, you know what, I'm gonna get in there, I'm gonna crump face, and I'm gonna go home happy. Now you can try this very straightforward approach. Now if you get turn 1 and you're able to just advance like a motherfucker all the way up the board and get your charges off, sure, yeah, you can have great success. But say you lined up all your lads like this and you all of a sudden didn't get first turn. Well, now all of these gits back here can see right down Main Street into Gazzy's unit or down this slice right into your boys that are half on that terrain piece, and they will be shot and most likely picked up off of the table. And then all of a sudden, use a sad git. Because now a lot of your stuff has died before yous even got to roll any dice of your own. So again, that is why using terrain to your advantage, lads, as well as utilizing other list building techniques like battle wagons and trucks as transports to hide all of your juicy melee gits, is vital to keeping your boys safe and winning your games. So with that, thanks everyone for watching. This has been the Daily Krumper, signing out.